think we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. As we always do, we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties. And we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'd like to welcome all of the members of council and staff who are with us tonight to this meeting, and also the people at home who are joining us via YouTube. And when the meeting is concluded, before we go into a scheduled in-camera session, there will be an opportunity for the people at home who choose to do so to question or ask a question on any issue that council discusses tonight. We also have our public input session, but I'm given to understand that no one has indicated a desire to speak at the session tonight. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. And we'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda with one amendment. The piece on personnel will not be addressed tonight. There will be just two items in the in-camera session. So, Councillor Curley.
I move the agenda be approved and circulated.
As amended.
Oh, as amended, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go right ahead to the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 28th. Councillor Carver,
Move that they be accepted as circulated.
thank you. Councillor Lawrence-Croft seconds. On the motion, on the question, all in favor, motion is carried. There is no public input session requirement this evening. Citizens that opportunity does exist. There are no presentations. Let's go right to correspondence. We have two items, 5152, both from the Legion. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move that council direct staff to inform the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 49 that the town will be making a $250 donation to support the 100th anniversary of the Soldiers Monument and the General Remembrance Day ceremony this year.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. On the motion, on the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to 5.2. Veterans Banner Initiative. Councillor Carver.
I would move that we support the initiative for the Veteran Banner project.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded. On the question.
And I have a question.
Okay.
I just want to know how, if staff will look into how this will work with what we already have on our polls. Sort of give us an idea of what it would, we have hanging plants and we have those sailboat images, like, would they all be, it wouldn't stand out if it's among a whole bunch of other things. So I think there needs to be a plan for poll sharing or whatever.
CAO, do you have a comment on?
Well, I mean, Public Works obviously work with the electric utility to make sure that they do this in a safe way. It always used to be common to put banners overhead on Main Street. I'm actually not up to date on the requirements there, so I don't want to misspeak, but I'm sure that we can do what we're allowed to do and make sure it fits with existing installations on the poles.
Safe to say that with the motion, if it can be done safely, staff will undertake to do it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, and so I guess we would be the ones who decide to what extent this would be done. So if we go ahead and do the banners that are being promoted here, they're, you know, we would decide how many of these we want to install. So for example, we've done one on Edgewater Street previously. We've done just along the poles there where there are brackets. So we might want to contemplate putting them there. The motion was just to support, but I suppose to an extent it would be a good idea to make sure that council's comfortable with whatever we come back on. So like, are you all willing to?
Mayor, I think the note suggests that this is a 2024 initiative.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I think as
Yeah.
far as acknowledging council's, interest in supporting the Legion and everything they do. But I'm sure that the details can be worked out and we can receive a report back in due course.
Okay,
I do have just a suggestion that we send this letter out to the budget profile for next year.
okay.
Yeah, well, we'll need to have a budget for it. I think it makes sense to have a recommendation between now and budget time, and I'm not sure if the mover and seconder would be willing to add that. So we say to express support and then to direct staff to bring a recommendation ahead of the 2024-25 budget process. And that way we can put a number to something.
So could we support it just in principle then, like for tonight?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Just say the motion would be to support it and then also direct staff to bring a recommendation for budget.
That'd be a friendly.
I'd be happy to amend the motion to support in principle and
Refer to staff.
refer to staff to work with the Legion.
Yeah, now that in hindsight, I do actually, we did, Shelburne's one of the examples. We did do this while I was there.
The ones that I remember seeing, I think are posted lower than the things that we have up now. So you could actually see faces.
I think the
Right,
Edgewater
that
should
is.
be
Yes.
probably gonna be ideal, but we'll just see what the options are. And that recommendation. Yeah, what they had done in some communities was they worked with the Legion to identify specific individuals who were from the
Yeah.
community who had pictures. Yeah, so if we have a whole year, then.
What the motion was now?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Note the deputy mayor has joined us. As he promised he would. Okay, so that ends the correspondence. Let's go to staff reports. This is the first meeting of the month, so. Does anyone have any questions for the CAO? For the report that's presented?
Lots of stars now.
We're making some
Let's get
progress. There's a lot of these things that are really close to coming off the list.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So I'll prove that we see the staff report for information purposes.
thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Let's go to 6.2, the town council policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is just follow up on, there were previously some motions to direct staff to amend the wording of a policy, and our clerk pointed out that, of course, you have to have 7 days where those draft changes are made public prior to an amendment. So normally what we do is we present a draft and then we say, you can vote on the draft at the next meeting. But because this came up relatively on the fly, I think the appropriate thing to do was to put the actual policy up on this one, and then everybody can see the changes in context, but it also ensures that we've adhered to the MGA. So there was a slight suggested change, I think. Kelly, are they highlighted in them?
You know what, I don't know if they are. But it was
I guess I can look at the numbers at the bottom.
14.
4, 5, and 4, 13.
Yeah.
Mhm.
In 413, when Kelly and I went over the change, I changed the order of the two clauses, so it's one way in the motion, I think.
Mhm.
But what I was suggesting was that council members will not be obligated to, are obliged to respond to questions, would go ahead of members of council may seek clarification by directing questions to members of the public. It was the other way around initially,
Mhm,
but my suggestion was that we do it this way around for clarity.
mhm.
If everyone's okay with it, those are the only proposed changes, and the recommendation here is to adopt the amended policy as presented. If there are any questions, we're happy to take them.
Councillor Carver.
Move that the the policy be adopted as presented.
Do we have a seconder,
I'll
Councillor?
second it. I just have a question.
Okay,
I'm noticing here that there's 2 413s.
We can say as amended. and
For
all.
all the times that we amended this thing, yeah. as-
Second set of eyes, all numbered.
that's why they get
Encourage it.
signs and numbers on the houses, so the firefighters can find them.
That's right. Good catch.
So staff will
As amended.
amend it.
It's re-amended.
It's real.
Yeah, the amended policy as amended.
Okay. On the motion, on the question, all in favor, motion is carried, thank you. Let's go to special constable status.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one's been a little time in coming, but we had an opportunity to bring it forward here tonight, and this follows on a number of occasions when, particularly during the winter season, Public Works has, encountered vehicles parked illegally or obstructing traffic and had to work with our bylaw enforcement officer to address those issues. To expedite that, obviously still in coordination with bylaw enforcement, we'd like to appoint our manager of public works and transportation as a special constable. And that would essentially just give us a little more flexibility when it comes to enforcing bylaws and provincial legislation concerning transportation. In a pinch, the special constable status is equivalent to the bylaw enforcement officer. But obviously Jonathan's more than busy enough dealing with transportation matters, so this is not expected to give us an extra enforcement capacity per se, but it would certainly help on the occasions where bringing Al in is not easy or, unnecessary. So that's our recommendation to appoint Jonathan. This is not specific to any discussions council's had about bylaw enforcement with respect to parking or noise. This is just kind of a day-to-day operational recommendation.
Is there any special training that he would have to have in order to carry these out, or so that we're not, if he has somebody told that we're not challenged?
I think it's only on our end, so we would want him to be capable, to know how to do this, so he would be trained by Al in terms of the protocols that Al would use when issuing tickets and approaching people, but it's not, there's nothing on the provincial side.
Okay. Councillor Carver,
I'd be happy to recommend that council appoint Jonathan Yulman as the special constable for the town of Mahone Bay to enforce parking violations pursuant to the Motor Vehicle Act.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? You've heard the motion?
I just have
On the question?
a question. Can we be reminded again about the role of the RCMP in relation to parking?
We're in discussion on the motion, I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, I think it's discussion on the motion.
Yeah, so I mean, the RCMP obviously have the right and responsibility to enforce legislation. Most of the parking requirements that what we talk about in town here come from the provincial legislation. So, blocking a hydrant, blocking a laneway, obstructing traffic, getting in the way of operations, those kind of things. So RCMP absolutely, if they observe any of those issues, they're empowered to issue a ticket or have a tow or whatever. And they generally, I think, will, unless they're on their way to another call, if they observe it. But in terms of going out and specifically looking for those type of violations, they don't have the capacity. And then, were we to bring them to their attention, it typically would take longer for them to respond than for us to get out the commands.
So either Al or Jonathan could handle that situation if we saw it and we called it in.
Yeah, we wouldn't, so if, let's say after hours, for some reason, let's say somebody called our contact line and said, someone's parked in front of my home or, blocking the road. Maybe they're on one of our one lane lanes and somebody's blocking it. And, normally in that situation, our only option would be to go to Al. And, in particular, if Public Works is already out, possibly doing snow clearing or anything, Jonathan is easier to bring in those circumstances. And then obviously anytime during the day, Jonathan's already here and, we're the first to come into contact with an issue and we can resolve it right on the spot. Generally, it's not going to be about issuing tickets in most of these cases. Al does try to locate the vehicle owner and is usually fairly successful with that. But a tow may be necessary, and we have had to do that before if you can't find the vehicle, because the need is to move the vehicle, not issue a ticket.
Thank you.
Councilor Scott.
Just when we discussed that he may also do some other bylaw in cases where the bylaw officer wasn't able to come in, maybe our motion should include that because it's specific to.
Well, the reason I made it specific, and maybe we could say traffic violations instead of parking violations, that's a little more broad, and I realize in hindsight I should have probably said traffic violations, but as far as anything else, I didn't want it to be construed to the public that was a function that the Public Works Department would be carrying out.
Okay.
So just making it clear that, this is why council is appointing him. It's not to get him to do the other stuff. Now, if Al isn't available to us and we get a call about a dangerous premises, for example, like a, barn is falling over or something like that, Jonathan would put up caution tape, and this would give him the ability to enter somebody's property within the legislation. So it will be handy, but yeah, I think I would recommend it the way it's written or as traffic, which I thought of just now, but I wouldn't make it any broader than that. And at the end of the day, the appointment is through the provincial government, so it's not really constrained by the motion. What the motion constrains is how we're going to use Jonathan out there on, on the job, and he has a full-time job, so we won't have time to do.
I think I would prefer to have the traffic in there rather than parking, because the parking is very specific.
Yeah, I think traffic's better if we can get support for that, but.
And it's also pursuant to the Motor Vehicle Act, so parking like parking too close to a fire hydrant. But the no parking here to the corner sort of thing that the town may choose to put up. That's not pursuant necessarily to the Motor Vehicle Act.
Depending on how it is.
Does that mean he doesn't have any requirement to deal with that?
So I guess I would hope that is not how people would read pursuant to the Motor Vehicle Act, or I guess we think that right. All of our regulations around parking as a local authority, if we establish an area of no parking, or if we establish a time limit, that becomes pursuant to the Motor Vehicle.
It's deemed to be
Yeah,
pursuant,
yeah.
is it?
We have that authority as a local jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise the RCMP also couldn't enforce those things, which they can enforce, but they don't always choose to.
Councillor Wilson.
I suggest a friendly amendment to change the word from parking to traffic.
Thank you.
I didn't have any motion.
Yeah. Who was the second?
I'll second.
You.
No, Councillor Carver moved and Councillor Wilson.
Wilson, okay. So we're good to go with the friendly amendment.
Yeah.
That it will read to enforce traffic violations.
Pursuant to the,
Yeah,
because even when we have I'm assuming when we put up those signs from no parking here to the corner, it's within the distances under the motor vehicle act,
Specified,
specified in the motor
Yeah, and I mean, every now and then it won't be because you couldn't fit a car length between a laneway and the corner or whatever, those circumstances. But even still, we as the local jurisdiction, by having dedicated an area no parking, regardless of the reason, we have the authority under the act to enforce that.
okay. So we're still on the motion, on the question.
Oh,
Oh, do you
I
have
have
another
another
question?
question if
Go
I
ahead.
may. So if citizens see something, a traffic or parking issue, should they call town hall? How should they respond if they want it dealt with?
Yeah, if they want something dealt with, they should call the office here. If it's between 9 and 4, if it's outside of those hours, they should call the contact center line. Yeah, and that will either go to Jonathan or I, unless it's during a part of the year in which we have Public Works on call for snow removal. But we'll get it sorted with whoever goes to.
Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. 6.4, South Shore Regional Library Board appointment. I think we have a couple of options in that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's been a while in coming, but at the end of the day, it just puts the ball back in your court by saying that you can appoint either a member of council or a member of the public to represent Mahone Bay on the South Shore Library Board. So I assume that the options are, unless there is a member of the public that I'm not aware of, that we either appoint a member of council now, or we would advertise for a member of the public. I actually don't remember in the midst of time, on December 13th of last year, which one we were hoping to do. So,
Councillor Cardinal.
Well, I think we advertised for a member of the board last year.
Yes.
And we haven't had one for a long time, but I know that Councillor Wilson was at one time the library representative. And when we did have a member of the public as the library representative, I think we found we didn't ever hear back. We didn't have a mechanism in place to hear back but for the feedback group. So I kind of like the idea of a citizen representative being being the person, but without that feedback loop, it's a little problematic.
Councillor Longstreth.
Okay, did they ask for feedback specifically to the person? Maybe they didn't know that they were to report back to council, but I would suggest we ask the two people that work on the bookmobile who may be an interested person or candidates that may be interested, and sometimes just asking somebody, they won't step forward, but I think a lot of their recommendations when they're looking for board members do come from their from the feedback they get from the clerks on the bus.
What's the connection, if I could, between the library board and the operation of the bookmobile?
Well, they're staff of the public library, and they know the people in Mahone Bay who have the greatest interest in books and who are regular bookmobile
Okay,
people. They also, a lot of them are volunteers at the public locations, and I just think it'd be a good starting point if we're looking for someone from the public rather than advertising again.
well,
And I'm willing to do that if you would like.
to what, advertise or what?
No, to speak to the clerks on our bookmobile that comes every Thursday.
Well, so I think that would indicate that we're choosing option 2. And the first query would go to the people that work on the bookmobile.
Well, we have to advertise as well, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's at the council. So if we go with option number 2, it would be to advertise, and then we just let these individuals know that we would love to see them putting their names in.
Yeah.
So if that's what we go for, and then Suzanne can follow it up individually. If we wanted to not go out for a public call, obviously that's council prerogative. I would just defer this decision to your next meeting to give Suzanne time to talk to these folks, but it's really council's decision either way.
What would you like, council?
I think also if we decide to go with the public member, they would put something in there saying that we'd like to get a monthly report from them. Or whatever, how often they meet, if it's cool, I'm not sure how often they meet.
They could just send the minutes of the
Yeah.
last board meeting to us.
Yes,
Councillor Wilson?
I suggest we table this item until first meeting in November.
Okay. And Councillor almost crossed that as an opportunity to do some state work and see what might be out there.
I'll second.
Motion to defer.
Yeah, that's a motion, yeah.
Deputy Mayor?
I think it's been seconded.
It's been seconded, all right. On the question.
Just
Councillor
before the vote, I'm just wondering if Councillor Wilson has any input from the council perspective, council member perspective, having sat on that board.
No, you didn't see me volunteering, did you? I can say that they do have good sandwiches. Meetings are a waste of time. Frankly.
Well, we won't leave with that when we're looking here.
No, I know many,
Leave with the sandwich.
I know many people who work, sit on that board and they have a fairly good board, so. But they have a special, most of them have a special interest in libraries and are users.
All right,
You'll follow it up between now and the next meeting.
all right. On the question, on the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. So it's deferred until the first meeting in November. And we'll have more information when we come back to it. Let's go to 6.5, fire hall uses.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So further to that point earlier, about trying to knock some of the things off of the to-do list, we have had on there since the budget, on our to-do list, a request for report contemplating alternate, guess how uses of the proposed uses of the old fire hall could interact with each other. And you know, I sat down with Jonathan to start on this, and we started by reviewing what space potentially was available, and he reiterated his comments, which are included here, that, you know, the feeling is that Public Works does need more of the space than the existing bays, that they would still like to renovate the old hall area for their use. It doesn't have to include everything in the Yost report, but it would have to include the bay doors, maybe even an opportunity to repurpose these ones, although I'm not sure about that. But ultimately, when we got talking about what Public Works would want to do, it didn't leave very much of the building. It really only leaves the separate outside accesses for either what used to be the club room, and then some combination of the kitchen and canteen, and or the outside access at the bottom corner that's pictured in the report, which comes out right at the washrooms, basically. And you know, knowing that in addition to Public Works, we have such a need, and it's come up a lot in the past year, for a good space for electric utility inventory. The opportunity there, which is being obviously, you know, coveted by our electric utility staff, to have somewhere by renovating the kitchen and club room into a storage area that they could use for inventory in Mahone Bay, which they've never had a place that, you know, proper, secure, lit, heated place to keep their inventory in Mahone Bay. It's always been kept in sea cans and then in Riverwood. So, you know, if we were going to do that, all that's left in terms of space is the public washroom area. And the Yost report did speak to the notion that that could potentially be made available through an outside access. Now, whether the town has any interest in expanding our comfort station speaks a lot more to the operating costs than it does to the existence of the space. So really, the recommendation here around getting accessibility review of that space would really just be intended to provide council with a little bit more information to inform a decision. If council's, you know, not interested in contemplating that use as a comfort station, we can save the time, obviously, and not do that. But it was, I think, when we got down to it, the only sort of compatible external use of the building that we could envision. I will grant that we could not let the electrical utility into the building and use the back area that I mentioned with the former club room and kitchen as a rental space of some kind. But given the, you know, relative returns for doing that versus the value to our electric utility, I mean, I don't recommend that. And so I guess, you know, I was a little challenged to talk with Jonathan about this, how far we go into envisioning a scenario that we don't recommend, in which that back part is privately rented. Now, if council members feel that this report misses the intention, and you really need to know about possibly renting that back part, I certainly can provide a follow-up report. But I didn't think it was really responsible to get into a scenario that, you know, strongly contradicts with what I think the appropriate use of that space would be, having talked to the relevant departments. So our recommendation here just speaks to that accessibility review, and continues to push this along for council's eventual decision making. But I understand there are many, many more moving pieces that council will have on their minds as you approach this issue.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with the CEO that this thing needs to be put to bed for sure. I must admit, I missed it in the Yost report, but I cannot, in any possible scenario, understand why we have a comfort station up there when, you know, I mean, why? Who would go up that hill to go to the bathroom? I just can't understand that. So I think I hope we can put that to rest. I guess I surrender when it comes to accepting the fact that Public Works and the electrical utility are going to expand into and use up essentially all of the 7,000 some odd square foot space when they a year ago had 650 square feet that was falling down on their heads. So
Yeah.
fair enough. What I would like to ask, and I don't quite know how to do this, but given our fiscal situation and the fact that we don't want, I think, to borrow any more money, I would like to implore town staff to put these people in place in that building at almost no cost. So the notion of spending $1.5 million to renovate that building, I think, is a non-starter. I think if we have to put in a couple of overhead doors and those will fit fine, that building needs to come down right away. Jonathan needs to move over so we can start using the oil boilers to heat one little office out back. So there are a lot of moving parts, but I'm prepared to move a motion at the next meeting if that's in order to make the old fire hall the home of Public Works and the electrical utility for the next 10 years, understanding that it's to be at absolute bare bones cost. And maybe we could have as an addendum to that, and the building behind that town hall comes down forthwith.
I'll second that one.
On the question for the motion.
That's not my motion, I just said it.
Okay, you'll get the
Council
conflict.
next.
Council in between that.
Deputy Mayor.
So I truly believe this report is very unfortunate in the sense that it triggers a conversation we're not ready to have. From my perspective, and I think this was said a few months ago, the cooperative asked council to give them time to do a feasibility study. They applied for funding, which we supported. They will come back with a report that will provide extra information for us to consider. So I think based on that, we should think about, we don't have enough information to weigh all the options. I don't think we're ready for a motion. It will just send us into a tailspin, making decisions without really thinking about it. So
It's a notice of motion.
yeah. So that notice will bring a motion to the table. I don't think we want to go there yet. If we want, if we want to get there, let's go there knowing you don't have the full range of information that we need to make a good decision about. We've had lots of back and forth about the Joyce report, how much money it will cost the public works garage. At the end of the day, we need to make a good fiscal decision. I don't think saying they will go in there without renovations is realistic. There has to be some renovations. How much we have to spend in there is what we need to consider in all this. So I'm not saying we park this in perpetuity, but I think let's have the information we know that we're getting and we've asked for. And when it comes to the table, let's dedicate a good chunk of time to have a very good, robust discussion when we have all the information that's out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carter.
I understand exactly where the deputy mayor is coming from, and I sympathize because I know that's outstanding. But and maybe I'm out to sea on this, but my view of the notion of renovating that building has always been that it was not a great idea. It just isn't a building that's amenable to housing, in my opinion. And I'm not an architect. But I think we have to understand that the sale of that building at full value, which is say $500,000, or the sale of it at half price at $250,000, either of those things is going to trigger at least a 3 and probably a 4-year process to build a $2 million public works building, which we can't afford. So what I would recommend, and this is an ancillary to my notice of motion, I would be happy to recommend to council that we find a piece of land, maybe a chunk of the property up opposite the old fire hall on that street.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
hive off an acre and a half or so and gift it to a worthy builder of affordable housing. they can start with a greenfield and have an opportunity to build something that's attractive and fit for purpose at probably a lot less money.
Okay, Councillor Carver, then Councillor No.
Picking up on the deputy mayor's comments, for me to have that conversation with full information, I would like to see a cost benefit analysis of the different scenarios that, for example, that Councillor Wilson outlined in his message. And I would resist making a commitment of 10 years because we don't know what's going to happen 2 months from now, a year from now, in terms of other priorities. So that it would help me to think about it clearly if there is some kind of cost benefit analysis of the different options that we have. But I don't think that I would be able to support a motion that committed to 10 years.
Up to 10 years.
Councillor No.
I've been looking at this a lot. And talking to some of the staff that are using the building currently. And they seem quite happy there. The only thing they really would like to see is a big door or two into the auditorium part, where they can store their smaller equipment and also supplies. And I think that could be done relatively inexpensively. We've got 2 good doors there. If they can't use those doors because of their size, I'm sure that we could arrange to get smaller doors from the supplier and trade those ones in on it and not cost us a whole bunch of money. Sorry, to better door that the manufacturer will have. So I think, I think a 10-year time frame is appropriate so that we have time to actually look at this. And if we're going to commit $2 million or more to a public works building, we need time to get our financials right now in place.
Okay. Councillor Feeney.
So I think the report answered the question that was originally requested from the motion, which was really, from a staff perspective, can you ever envision that particular building having shared use, partially being used for public works, partially being used for something else, not renting out to storage, public housing, or any number of other non-town public works uses. And I think we have a report that says no. So you either go all in and make it 100% public works, or you make it 0% public works. So I think to the degree that the report has done an excellent job of answering that question, terrific. So we know that now. We also know it's October, November, and I think we've already given nods that we're going to use the bays for public works this year. And I think we made a commitment a few months ago, because this building back here might not even be here at Christmas time, depending on the sequencing. Right, and we knew we had a commitment to public works, which we collectively made, that we're going to support them being in that building, because the original motion was temporary. Councillor Lonis Croft made the motion, and it was the temporary use of the fire hall for public works. Well, now temporary is not so temporary. So we're now there. And I guess we're not really surprised that we're temporarily there permanently. So I do think that in the fullness of time, we have to really continue to refer back to these various reports, and the various reports say hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of renovations on a 70-year-old building. I mean, so I'm just reading the same reports that you're all reading, and all I'm seeing is, like, it originally started at 280, then it went to 790, and then the last report, I think, was more like 1.5 million of renovations to this building. So I don't believe we have the money, to Councillor Wilson's point, to erect a $2 million building tomorrow, even if the business case justified it, based on our borrowing capacity and our other priorities and our big public works project next year. So I think we're in a good place, but the unfortunate reality is we have made promises to organizations that we weren't going to make a decision until they had their ducks in a row. And so we're kind of betwixt and between. So I think we're doing the right thing. Let's keep our powder dry. Let's not make any long-term commitments. We'll revisit this whole topic probably, next summer. By that time, the public works out, but by that time, the public housing group will come back with their money.
Do we know
And-
how close they are? Is anyone?
Or they won't, and then temporary, and we can revisit the motions of support. Because I think we have several motions that are outstanding. One, we have a temporary use surplus building for public works that's in play, and we're gonna let that play out for a while longer versus a motion that I think will have to come back to council that says permanent forever use. That I think has to be a council motion at some point, not tonight, not next week, but at some point, maybe next week if Councillor Wilson put that, maybe we will have that conversation next week. I think we'd be worthwhile deferring it a while.
Next month.
Well, we have a group that's out there that has proposals into the federal and provincial government, based on us being patient. And so, yeah, we've been patient for a few months, but it's hardly in the wheels of government and the time it takes the government to make decisions. It like 3-4 months doesn't seem to be patient right now. So I think the real question for the council tonight and for next week and 2 weeks from now is really, what are we going to do this winter? And I'm assuming we're all supportive of using the fire hall as the public works for next winter. And to the degree that the report says, if you use the other non-bays for some other use, we still have to keep this building up. So I can understand why Jonathan and Dylan and Eric are reticent to say, guys, don't, it's not like we haven't said, feel free to tear the building down behind here. But I can totally empathize with why they're saying, I'm gonna be careful because I don't want to rip this building down and then find out that I don't have places to store my equipment. So anyway, I think we're doing the right thing. This is probably working out well.
Councillor now.
So, right at the present time, do we know approximately what Public Works has in the old building behind here? Because in the budget process, we determined that was coming down this fall. And I think it should come down this fall. But, what do they have in there that they have to move out? Do we know? I know they have some stuff in there.
Yeah, so in Jonathan's report, and in this report that we're talking about right now, he does make specific reference to that. Is that right now we've been finding there's not enough to store everything, particularly when we have the electrical and water in there. So over the winter, the electrical and water would be kept in the heated bays so that they're ready to roll. That means that the smaller equipment isn't going to be stored in there. He just saying remaining equipment and attachments. So, whether that's the tractor, it's not necessarily used as much in the winter. We've got our new trackless contraption. So I think it's just a matter of not everything can be stored. If we use the little bay here in the building, we store one vehicle outdoors, like we've been instructed to go ahead with the demolition, and we will. But obviously it's not going to be ideal this winter without it, but we haven't had an ideal circumstance for a long time.
Let's defer it. It's an appropriation in the budget for $30,000 to rip the building down and do all the renovations up front that we're obviously not going to get to do it. Why don't we just push it to next year and keep the garage up until next fiscal year?
I think it's a liability to our employees.
We'll use it in as limited a way as possible if we've survived.
So the reality is that they have more space than they had before.
Fair enough.
Councillor Wilson.
So
Fair enough.
No, you're fine, go ahead. I'll follow in your wake.
So I think staff they have the balls in their hands. If they want to take it down or not, if it becomes a risk, they already have the authority, given them the authority, so they can figure out what to do with that. We're in a better state than we were a few years ago when that building was not open and they could not put stuff in there. We can't leap into I guess an ideal state immediately now, and that's what we're trying to work with and to get to. And hopefully, by the time this year comes to an end, the cooperative will have come back with a report. That's the hope. They have the funding. Getting contractors is always an issue, but their plan is to make sure that they have a report by the end of the year. And that for me will give us the opportunity to sit down and sort of say, well, we now have all the reports that we were hoping to come. What's the best decision forward on this issue? And there's been suggestions here that we've never had before, so those will come into play, and we can talk about whether that building needs to come into the public hands and continue to be that way. I think the biggest issue from the get-go had been town council general expenses ballooning by another 50,000 because of incremental ongoing costs to maintain the building. That's something we should think about and how we move forward. I think in terms of prioritization, we can and should be able to, at some point in the next 3 years, be able to build a new public works building. That would be a good decision to make. But let's make that decision when we have all the information we need to have, and we have our ducks in a row. And I'm pretty sure with the heads here, we'll come up with a decision that we can stand with or stand by, and probably be able to. What I can foresee is a decision being passed on to the next council, not even us.
I was gonna say that, with all due
voice
respect,
of
the deputy mayor just committed himself to running again.
Yeah.
I would, just one reminder, and that is that when we asked for a cost of renovating that building to be used as a public works building, I think the wording was something similar to what I just said. That got converted into a request from the architect to renovate that building to the architectural standards of the new building, which is quite a different thing, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not an architect, but I think we can take those 2 garage doors and put them in that building for, if we wanted to, for under $50,000. And that would solve the problem.
What was the cost to put those doors in?
No, it wasn't that.
$8.
Yeah.
So if I could just, Mr. Mayor, speak to that, I agree with Councilor Wilson. But this really came back to Councilor Carvin's earlier point. What council requested in that case was a real apples to apples comparison of a new building versus a building that would for the next 10 years be as good as a new building. So, that's what we got. And when we're asked to come up with those sort of comparative, scenarios, I think it's the right way to do it, right? At the deputy mayor's point, we should be looking at operating costs over that whole period. So if you don't renovate to reduce the, heating loss, if you don't go ahead with the conversion to, away from fossil fuels, if you don't do all those things that we would do if we're operating the building for 10 years, then you don't really have an apples to apples comparison. And you really can't look at maintenance costs and ongoing operating costs. So if we just wanted to say, Jonathan, you talk to the electrical guys, come up with your own scope of renovations for use of the facility and get that number for budget. Like that's not something we've ever been asked to do, and it's not a difficult thing to do. But it will never be a apples to apples comparison with building a new building. Right? We shouldn't delude ourselves. And I think the deputy mayor was right on with that. Is what we'd have an old building that was functionally usable. And that's what I modeled 5 years ago when initially asked about scenarios. We never said, what would we have to do to turn this into a building that was as good as new? Well, we've said, knowing we have limited amount of money between this town hall building, the fire department building, and the public works garage, the town would spend the money first on building a new fire station, which we've done, and we see where we ended up with the others, and I think that's where we've seen where we've ended up. So, if there's ever a desire to go instead of an apples to apples comparison and just say, what would the budget number be for public works to have, year to year functional use out of the space? We can get that number, and I think it would be a helpful number to have, but I would caution away from any comparison where it's like, well, we could spend $100,000 renovating, or we could spend $2 million on a new building and we'd have the same thing. Well, we wouldn't have the same thing, but functionally speaking, we'd be able to satisfy the day-to-day needs of the department.
So,
Yeah,
which is the same thing.
which is, well, it's good enough for me, but.
So the apples to apples comparison, or a cost benefit analysis involves more than just the money. It involves our values and what we think is important. I mean, clearly we think that having an adequate facility for public works is important, but we also value having affordable housing, or housing that is affordable in the community. And you can't really cost those things. But we can't, so we can't lose those values, in talking about dollars only.
And I think the other scenario that was mentioned here tonight, if you're, trying to get that objective comparison, and again, I'm not sure I get to it in time. Is what would it take to develop housing on our other vacant piece of property? And so we know that to further the argument of giving some time, we know that Public Works has, requisitioned more information on that piece of property. Which I think will go away to determining, like, for example, the scenario of dividing off 1.5 acres. Like, what do we actually have as buildable land there, and what type of remediation might be necessary to get all of that land to be buildable? So that's another argument in favor of taking some time to have all the information needed. That being said, I do want to remind, I was never bringing this report forward to ask council to make any major decisions.
Yeah.
Just simply to rule in or out this question of possibly having a conversation, which if there's no direction on tonight, I'll hate to be ruled out. But I just want to make sure that people understand that if you later came back and said, hey, that would be interesting, I want to know more about that, it will be too late to find out.
Okay, so, excuse me, CEO, so where are you suggesting it's being left at tonight?
So all that I'm saying is I put this report on council's agenda to contemplate all additional uses outside of Public Works. The only one that we felt was compatible was the possibility of a conversation. If I get no direction on the conversation, I'm going to take that to be back off the table. I don't have to do any further research about that. And if I have no further direction, you can just accept this report for information. That's the only thing I put it forward for.
So,
That's me.
Mayor, I'm quite satisfied that the report answers the request from the original motion. And the request was very specific. In staff's opinion, do they think that that building could ever be used effectively for shared use? We have the report, and I think it makes completely logical sense, and I think we should accept it. I think out of the discussion, there are a couple other things that have come up in this evening. One is, the fact that we have several competing motions done at various moments in time that need to be addressed by council. The original motion from Councilor Alonis Croft that talked about the temporary use of the facility, I think was well supported by everyone around council last November, I believe, right after he joined council, December. So here we are, we're 10 months later, and I think we're really talking, I think we should reiterate that motion, maybe have a date. Like, so we should, because I think once you go by 12 months, it's no longer temporary.
Until another use was found.
Until another use, oh, is that?
Yeah, it
how
was
ended up? Okay.
until a decision was made.
And then the second issue is that we also have a motion saying that we are going to wait patiently until the housing group came back with some information about whether they would have any opportunity to utilize the facility and acquire it from the town. And I'm not sure what the timing is, but maybe we don't need to make any decision. So it's not crystal clear to me how we could respond to Councilor Wilson's motion 2 weeks from now with those other two motions outstanding, because I think if I reading the motion correctly, it would actually supersede both. It would trump both those other motions and make them. We'd have to send a letter back to the housing group and say we've made a permit. We're going to make a decision to permanently use the old fire hall for public works, and maybe that's where we end up. I'm not trying to prejudge that, but I think that would trigger a requirement for us to tell the housing group that sorry, we couldn't wait anymore. We're going forward. And the other issue would be that the temporary use would become permanent use. So I guess the facts on the ground are going to tell the tale. I just don't know if they're going to tell the tale really well 2 weeks from now. But anyway, we'll wait and see.
Okay. Anything else?
What type of timeline are we gonna give these housing people? I mean, are they gonna give them a year, 2 years,
That's why I was
kind of a,
querying if anyone had any idea of where they are with the proposal that they're developing. Deputy Mayor?
So my suggestion would be, I can do a motion for staff to write to the cooperative to provide council sort of a
An
timeline
update?
or an update, and that will trigger communication between the co-op and
Okay.
town, and we can provide sort of this is the time window we're looking at the feasibility study. This is when we're anticipating a report, and that will give us an idea to sort of say maybe at this particular time we'll have a report and we can schedule a meeting to talk about this.
Do we have a seconder, Deputy Mayor's motion? Councillor Carver? On the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. So we'll be directing staff to write to the housing group to get a timeline from them or an update as to how it's going.
One last point of clarification, I guess, to the CAO. So as I read the memo suggests that in the absence of being able to use the auditorium area of the hall this winter, the public works group still needs the garage in front of the town hall.
They've been directed to make preparations for its demolition, so they're
Okay.
not expecting to have it this winter.
There-
What they will have is they'll have vehicles that are not stored in the way that they would find most optimal for their use. But they'll figure that out, so I expect they'll still use the bay here at the office. And I expect they'll still have to keep at least one vehicle, stored outdoors. They referenced there, Jonathan references having made an arrangement for alternative storage, so during the winter, we don't really use the chipper. There's certain equipment they can shift it around so that the stuff they need is accessible to them. So unless council directs us not to demolish that building, we're gonna still be adhering with council's directives to get it down. And I did talk to Jonathan about that recently. That is his intention.
So what do we have to do tonight to deal with this recommendation of yours to?
Either make it or.
I don't
just
think, I don't think for us to make renovations to the hall back there to do a comfort center. We've got a public comfort center just up the hill from that.
Yes, now that is a distinction I was making when chatting with the mayor between comfort center and comfort station, and I wish we could, and I don't know if I'm allowed to stop using the term comfort station forever. But I'm gonna keep using it because for some reason, that's the term we've used. So a comfort station is just a public washroom. And the notion with the public washroom is that it would be able to be open with an external access without having staff be open to service it. So the question would be, is there any need for a public washroom in that area? And if council doesn't feel there is, then that kind of puts it to bed. But just to be clear, it wouldn't be an emergency function. It would just be a public washroom that is available to the public with outside access.
Deputy Mayor,
So I'd like to know the council accept this report for information.
thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. You heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay. Let's go to, that's the end of 6.5. There are no council items anyone would like to raise. Let's go to committee reports, the policy and strategy committee, and there is a motion hidden in there.
Indeed, I'm sure you want to make that.
Mayor, I'd move that staff be directed to prepare a report on the potential amendment of the draft noise bylaw in response to public feedback received.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carter, seconds. On the question, Councillor Carter, I saw your note today about the information. That really clarifies.
Yeah,
Simplified it and clarified it.
the NSFM has
Yeah.
circulated the updated regulations.
Calculator wrote.
Yeah,
I don't know.
well, it was very, very technical.
Yes.
But the definitions were useful.
Yeah,
So anyway,
but I thought the DB numbers were extremely low.
were they ever?
In spite of the discussions that we
Yeah.
get into with our citizens over
Yeah.
the numbers we were suggesting were levels of conversation. And these numbers were, 28 and 30 and 32. Yeah, anyway,
You think,
pardon me?
you can't be sure.
Well, no,
Not after reading that report, I don't think anybody could say for sure, but
okay, so we do have a motion on the floor on the question. Anything further? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
So there's an issue that we never did a motion or never finalized it. We had a presentation from, I can't remember. trying to remember, Siponis.
Oh, yeah.
We never, I don't think we gave staff direction in any way, shape or form, and I was wondering, who did?
Well, we decided not to do anything with it,
Okay.
which doesn't require direction. So I guess the one piece that's missing, if you wanted to, would just be, we didn't direct staff to like write a thank you letter to Robert or anything, which I did thank him, but you could do that.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we staff write to Robert to thank him for his presentation and wish him well with his project.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Sure.
Counselor Wilson. Moved and seconded on the question.
Would we also indicate in the letter that, council is not ready to take action on on his invitation?
I did let him know.
Yeah.
So I think if the letter is more just a
Just thank you for his
thank you.
time and his
Appreciate it.
interest.
I did also give him a little bit of feedback just based on our conversation after he had departed. Because what he was trying to do was figure out what would make this tool more useful. So I think even just your conversation was helpful.
Okay, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. No new business. Okay.
60 minutes.
My God, it's 8 o'clock. With that, we come to the end of our regular agenda. We will have an in-camera session to deal with the topic under 10.1 MGA 22(2)E, the acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property, and also item under 10.3 MGA 22(2)E, contract negotiations. I'd like to thank everyone at home who has taken the time to join us tonight. And if anyone has any questions about any topic that council discussed tonight, now would be the time to ask those questions. Clerk, do we have any? How many people do we have? Now, was that like 500 or? Hey, 5 people is more than we had 10 years ago.
Can I count for 3?
Fair enough. Okay, we'll just wait for a minute to see if anyone is struck by a question. Nothing, Clerk? No, okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And as I suggested at the last meeting, if you see me or one of the counselors on the street and you want to discuss an issue with them, please do not hesitate to do so. Or you can call Town Hall and make an appointment to have a one-on-one discussion. So thank you for joining us. We'll take 5 minutes while we.
Need the in-camera motion first.
Here you go. Moved, seconded, all in favor, motion's carried. We're going in camera.